Hello, welcome back to the PMP Underline series. In the previous video, we had discussed everything about project initiation and all the different steps that you can cover as part of project initiation in your project. And in today's session, we will discuss all the different project methodologies and what are the differences between each of them. All the different project methodologies that we'll discuss today are covered in lesson 2, topic A of the student manual. And the idea of this bite-sized mini clips is that you watch a video with me, and when you go back to your student manual, you'll have some understanding of what you're looking for. And as you read through the student manual, it would become easier for you to understand and grasp all the fine details and the key differences between all the different project methodologies. So with that understanding, let's get started. For many projects, the project methodology may be an obvious thing, and this is something that would be clearly and widely understood between the team members and the different stakeholders in terms of what would be the most appropriate or the suitable methodology or the expected methodology that's going to be applied to the given project. However, for certain projects, determining the methodology may not be so straightforward and easy, and that's the whole idea of what we'll discuss today, what all those methodologies are and what the differences between them are. To begin with, on one side of the spectrum, we have the plan-driven or the predictive project methodology. This is sometimes referred to as traditional project methodology because when project management got started in those days before the IT revolution, most of the projects were either from the construction industry or the mechanical engineering related projects or industrial related projects. And one of the key characteristics of a plan-driven project is that the scope of the project is widely understood and is clearly defined very, very early in the project. On the other side of the spectrum, you have projects in which change is a constant. These are all the projects that are grouped as adaptive projects, and we'll discuss how change management can very easily get incorporated and embedded into the project. In between these two methodologies, predictive and plan-driven on one side and adaptive and change-driven on the other side, we have what is called as the hybrid project methodology. And in essence, the hybrid methodology is a blend of predictive and adaptive, and the idea is that some portions of the project or some aspects of the project would be done with the predictive approach, while some other aspects of the project may be susceptible to change, or change may be expected for those components, those aspects of the project. And hence, in a hybrid methodology, simply by combining predictive and adaptive methodologies, you would be able to successfully deliver the project. When it comes to adaptive project methodology, it can further be broken down into three types. One of them is iterative, and you have incremental and also agile project management methodologies. So we'll cover all of these different methodologies today. And the idea of this bite-sized clip is to better understand each of this methodology and the differences between them. Let's get started with the first methodology, which is predictive project management methodology. And the key aspect of this project methodology is that the scope of the project is very well defined, and usually the scope of the project is agreed upon between the different stakeholders, and therefore you would be able to plan for the whole project before you are able to start the execution, which will mean that the scope is well defined, the deliverables is properly defined, and hence you can prepare the project management plan thoroughly even before you start your execution. One of the reasons why this would be possible is that the teams would be able to draw upon the experience that they have in the past working on similar projects. And usually there'll be one large delivery towards the very end of the project when the execution gets completed. While we said that in the other methodology, which is adaptive, change is a constant, changes can also be incorporated in a plan-driven or a predictive project, but they come with a cost, meaning that any change, the earlier it's brought into the project, the more cost-effective it would be to implement that change. So let's say that there's a change happening to the project. If this change in the requirement or this change to the scope is specified very early in the planning, then it will still cost us to do that change, but that'll be the optimal cost. However, the same change, let's say it's brought into the project, by the time when the planning is almost done, you would have to redo some of the plans, and that's going to cost more for the project. Similarly, the same change, if it is brought into the project when execution is already underway, then there might be a lot of rework to be done because of this change, and therefore the same change will cost a lot more to the project the later it gets brought into the project. That's why one of the important characteristic of a plan-driven project or a predictive project methodology is that the stakeholders need to get identified before you start your project planning. And because the team has experience working on similar projects in the past, it's easier to identify all the stakeholders for the project very early. And that early part of the project phase is the project initiation phase. And this is something that we covered in the previous video. A classical example of a project that applies a plan-driven methodology is usually all the construction projects, any project which is engineering related project or industrial or mechanical engineering related projects. These are all typical projects that apply a predictive project methodology. Now let's move to the other side of the spectrum where change is a constant. And remember, there are three types of projects which are adaptive. The first one that we will look at now is the incremental project. And the basic idea of an incremental project is that the whole project is broken down into phases. And usually by the time you complete any phase, you're actually also delivering a portion of the project. And because your whole project is made up of multiple phases, it's very easy for the customer or the stakeholder or the client to be able to incorporate changes or define changes. They can add or remove requirements as we go into the project phases. And this is how incorporating changes into this incremental methodology becomes easier. And if the requirements change or the client wants to add or remove certain requirements, it's easier to implement them as you start a new phase of the project. As an example, let's say that you're an IT contractor and you have a client who wants you to make a 12-story building ready with the IT infrastructure. Normally it means that you need to lay out the network cables, add some routers and some other equipment on site, add the CCTV solution, provide access control, and let's say that you also need to provide the Wi-Fi solution. And the idea is that the client wants you to finish 2 floors. And as you complete the 2 floors, the staff will move in, and that's when you move on to the next phase, which is the next 2 floors and so on. And if you're applying this approach, this basically is the incremental project methodology, and each phase for you would be to complete the 2 floors. And your project will therefore have a total of 6 phases. Let's say that you're in the middle of the project. It should be easier for the client to add something to the project scope. For example, while you're in the middle of the project, it should be easier for you as an IT contractor to, let's say, implement IPTV solution. And all you'll have to do is install the television sets, hook them up to the network. You can always go back to the previous phases, the previous floors, and install the TVs and hook them up to the network. So through this example, we understand how in an incremental project methodology, changes can easily be incorporated into the project. Another type of adaptive project methodology is the iterative project methodology. And the typical application of this methodology is in a scenario where the scope is not clear or how to get to the solution is not clear. So the problem would be known, the problem statement would be defined, what is meant to be achieved would be defined, but how to achieve that is probably not very well defined. Iterative methodology is also very suitable for projects which are innovative in nature, where trial and error is expected. So it's completely acceptable for an iterative project to have the project scope rewritten, redefined, added, removed, etc. It is completely okay and acceptable for an iterative project to apply what is called as the trial and error approach, where we know what the problem statement is. However, we don't know how to achieve that solution. So you might end up doing experiments and you might try to implement one approach and see what returns you get. And then based on that, you can decide either to redo the current step or move on to the next step. And usually there's one deliverable that's expected out of this project. However, the idea of an iterative project methodology is that if it is a new type of technology or a new approach to be implemented, or how to achieve the solution is not known, so you keep working on it, maybe try different options, and based on the options that you've already applied, either determine and decide to keep one of the options and expand on that, or to try something new. So this kind of an approach is what an iterative project methodology is about. And one of the best examples that we can use for this methodology in today's time is to find the vaccine for COVID-19 virus, which is WHO approved. So most of the pharmaceutical companies, they did experiments and trials and errors. And after several trial and errors and experiments, then one drug got selected, and iterative methodology has one deliverable that's expected out of the project. Similarly, you may have another project which is innovative in nature, and the whole idea is to find a solution or to find a breakthrough. The third adaptive project methodology is agile project management methodology. And when it comes to a PMP exam, assume that all software projects will apply an agile project management methodology. Consider a software to be a product. So any product would have a life cycle, and for the life cycle of the software, there would be multiple versions that would get released, and release of each version of the software can be one project, and in an agile methodology, each of that project is referred to as a release. So in a software life cycle, you would have multiple releases, and each release can be considered as a project. And furthermore, the agile project management methodology actually blends both iterative and the incremental approaches. Let me explain that now. We said that the software has a life cycle and a roadmap, and in that roadmap, you can have multiple releases, and each release is considered as a project. And within each release, you would agree with the client on what the sprint duration is. And let's say the sprint duration is 2 weeks, and therefore there's a delivery that's expected every 2 weeks. So you start a sprint, run it for 2 weeks, there's a delivery out of that. Then you start the next sprint, run it for another 2 weeks, and there's another delivery out of that. However, when you think of sprints, isn't each sprint sounding like a phase? So that's the incremental aspect of an agile project. Now, another way to understand software is that software is nothing but a collection of features or functions. And by developing all these features and functions, the software project gets completed. Let's go back to the product roadmap, where you have the different projects and each project is referred to as a release. What happens is all the collective features and functions that's expected out of the complete software, they get distributed between different projects, different releases. That's one level of prioritization of all the features and functions. And within one release, all the features and functions that are expected to be completed can further be distributed between all the sprints, and that's another level of prioritization. One of the common tools that gets used for prioritization is referred to as MOSCO. MOSCO is must-have features expected in this sprint, priority 1. Second level of priority is should have features, and then could have, and finally features which won't be done won't have. So that is your acronym MOSCO, used for prioritizing features. And now you get to understand how easy it is to shuffle the features, add or remove any feature to a sprint or even to a release. This aspect of being able to change the scope is the iterative aspect of the project. And when it comes to the PMP exam, consider that all software projects will apply agile project management methodology. And in summary, agile project management methodology combines the iterative and the incremental approach. And finally, let's discuss an example of a project which can apply hybrid project management methodology, which combines both predictive and adaptive methodologies. Consider that you're making a high-rise building, and the construction of the building can very well apply the predictive or the plan-driven methodology. And the idea is that each apartment in the building will be sold separately. So what you could do is have each of the apartment owner specify how they want the interiors to be. Some of the apartment owners may want an open kitchen. Some of them may want it to be walled. Some of them may prefer to have marble tops. Some may prefer to have carpet throughout the apartment. Some may prefer to have nothing but wooden floor throughout the apartment, and each apartment owner will have several options to choose from and customize based on their likings. And this can be the change-driven approach, where you have constructed the building using a plan-driven approach. However, each apartment owner can customize and create their apartment to their taste and to their liking, and that is the adaptive or the change-driven side of the project. And combining these two is your hybrid project management methodology. So with that, we cover all the different project management methodologies and the differences between them. The idea of my next video is to go a little bit more into the details of agile project management methodology, and we'll discuss different concepts and get a chance to look a little bit more closely into agile project management methodology. If you found this video to be interesting, or if you learned something new, please remember to like, share, or subscribe, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, bye-bye.